Hello and welcome back to From the Nosebleeds, a podcast about college football, and we get into college basketball this week with games returning next week. Podcast brought to you by myself, Walter Limbeck, and Jacob Wetzel. Wetzel, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. Got a nice slate of football games this weekend, and by the next time, I'm hopefully by the next time we talk, we'll have some college basketball games being played. So, very excited about that.
Yes, very excited for the basketball season. But first, let's talk some football and get into a preview. First up, we got Indiana at Ohio State, a top 10 matchup. Indiana ranked number 9 currently, Ohio State number 3. Both teams undefeated. Uh, Ohio State's the heavy favorite here at 20.5 currently. And, this is the first big game, if you will, for Ohio State, and considering Penn State is still winless on the year. What do you think about this one?
It's an interesting game because I think to me when I think of these kind of games, I think of Ohio State winning by whatever the number is and more. Like these are just like Ohio State doesn't lose these kinds of games to schools like Indiana that are just not football schools. I think back to a few years ago when they lost at Kinnick to that Iowa team that was good. You know, that's a different kind of game that's a different kind of team than this Indiana team is. I think the key to this one is going to be for Ohio State. I think the key is Justin Fields. He has shown he is everything and advertised and more. He's shown that he's he's a potential Heisman winner. You just keep riding him. He throws touchdowns, doesn't turn the ball over. He can run it. That offense, he makes that offense go. I think he's the key for Ohio State. For Indiana, I think you have to score points. You have to finish drives. You have to put points on the board. This game, Indiana cannot win this game. Like, they have a good defense, but they cannot win this game 17 to 14. It's just not going to happen. They have to be able to finish drives. They have to be able to put points on the board. Ohio State's defense has not been as good as it has been in recent years. Teams have been able to score on them, so I think it really comes down to if Indiana can put points on the board. Don't be afraid to make this game high scoring if you're Indiana, if you can, because you're not going to win a low scoring game.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Ohio State's defense. They don't have any of, like I've said this pretty much since week one, since the Big Ten's been back. They don't have any of the playmakers like a
Mm-hmm.
Chase Young or even, a cornerback on the outside to make those big plays and key moments that we're used to. Still waiting for somebody to step up and make a big play. Really haven't had a chance with their schedule so far, but I mean, they've given up 25 to Penn State, whose offense is in shambles right now. Gave up 27 to Rutgers. I mean, both those offenses aren't exactly elite, and neither is Indiana, but Michael Penix Jr. can move the ball up and down the field. So I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I mean, they got to score touchdowns. They can't rely on the field goals. Justin Fields, you mentioned he's having a great year. He has as many incompletions as touchdowns, and he has yet to throw a pick.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting. And then another thing is Indiana in their first 4 games have really kind of relied on the turnover to spring their offense. I believe it's something like 15 of their scoring drives have come off of turnovers. So they can't really rely on that going forward, especially against a team like Ohio State who doesn't beat themselves and doesn't turn over the football. So it'll be interesting to see how this offense can move the ball down the field against Ohio State.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first quarter or the first half, the first half is going to decide the game, because if Ohio State goes into halftime up 21-7, they haven't turned the ball over, they're moving up and down the field, they've gotten some stops, like that's the game, because Indiana's not going to be able to stop them. If they go through the first half and it's 28-21. Indiana's shown that they can move the football. Maybe you've gotten a turnover or two, like you said, that they rely on. I think Indiana's very much in the ball game with a chance to win. So I think if Ohio State doesn't turn the ball over and they put points on the board, they shouldn't have a problem with Indiana.
Yeah, and this spread being so large is a game I definitely want to talk about once we get into our bets. But we'll move on and go to another early game. And this one's a big one in the Fun Belt. We got Appalachian State at Coastal Carolina. Appalachian State, since being entering the Division One A realm, has been a very good team year in, year out, been very consistent in that conference, usually towards the top, and that's no different this year. Their lone loss came out of conference to Marshall. Of course, we know the Chanticleers are undefeated right now, currently sitting at number 15 in the rankings, and they are 5.5-point favorites at home this weekend.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about this when we get into bets because Coastal Carolina, I like them in this spot, only getting the 5.5 at home. But Coastal Carolina is 0-6 since they joined the Fun Belt against Appalachian State. Like you said, Appalachian State has kind of been the team of this conference. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about Zach Thomas, Appalachian State's quarterback. He went out. He left the game last week against Georgia State with an injury. I don't know if he's playing again this upcoming week. I have to imagine he will be with as big of a game this is. But this is a big game. I think Coastal Carolina has played well when they're playing good teams. Obviously, Kansas is not a good team, but that is a step up in their competition. They went to Kansas, got a road win, a very impressive road win. They had a game against Georgia State that a lot of people were kind of hyping up at Georgia State. They won that one 51-0. They won at Louisiana, who was ranked at the time, is still ranked. So, like when they play good teams, and I mean, if you want to, Kansas again, not a good team, but when they play like to their competition or better, they show up and they win, and that's why I really like them in this spot. To me, this is like I know there's Oklahoma State, Indiana, Ohio State, Cincy, UCF, but like this game is maybe like this is a top 3 or 4 game this week, just because you have two good teams, you have basically a conference championships game spot on the line with this for the winner. So very good game. I think I like Coastal. I'll talk about them again in my bets. I'm going to take them, but I think this should be a really, really entertaining and fun game.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. This is definitely one in the early slate that you want to keep an eye on. Both teams play pretty similar style of football, pretty balanced on offense, and both have good defenses. Both teams averaging over 30 points per game, but only giving up 16 points per game. And the big thing for me is Coastal Carolina's defense in those big games that you're talking about, where they play a team that's a step up. They really show up. That Georgia State game, they shut them out. Kansas, they only held them to 25 points. Again, it's Kansas, but still. Against Louisiana, they stepped up in big situations. So, I mean, this is a defense that steps up when you need them to. And Coastal, and I'll be interested to see how Appalachian State's defense responds to Coastal. Greg McCall has over 1,300 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and just the one pick for Coastal. So it'll be interesting to see how these defenses perform against these high-octane offenses.
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of it will also depend on if Appalachian State's quarterback plays Zach Thomas. I haven't seen anything. I'm looking at it right now. I haven't seen anything about him not playing, but yeah, Coastal Carolina's defense is legit for the level that they're at, and I think if Zach Thomas plays, I think this game is even that much more tight and competitive. I think if he doesn't play, I still think Appalachian State, a very run-heavy team, can still hang around. But I think if Coastal has to face Appalachian State without their starting quarterback. That really helps their defense be able to blitz, pin their ears back, and just go get a backup quarterback who may be a little bit nervous in this big game.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. See if Zach Thomas is playing in this one, because it could make a big difference. We'll move on to another Group of 5 game, a big one for Cincinnati, which seems like we say this almost every week. This time, Cincinnati's going to UCF and playing them at the 2:30 slot. Currently favored, depending on where you're at. ESPN right now showing they're favored at 6. This line's been moving all week. Cincinnati, we know about them, very good defensively, only allowing 12 points per game. Play kind of methodical on offense, but they still score a lot of points. UCF, obviously one of the fastest paced teams in the country. Currently just under pace for setting a record for most yards on average per game in the season.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The line is still at 4.5 on FanDuel. I think for the game, my thing for UCF, because home dog, they're not really familiar with that situation in recent years. I think it's we know how good Cincinnati's defense is. Can UCF run the football? Because Cincinnati's pass defense is very good. They have some NFL caliber players on that defense. UCF is currently averaging 222 rushing yards a game. I think that they have to be able to run the football, because that pass defense against Cincinnati, with how many times UCF throws the football, like Cincinnati could theoretically get UCF to a third to fourth down quick if they throw the ball as much times as they're used to. If they they also can throw some interceptions. Like if UCF throws the ball and does not have success this game, Cincinnati could make this game 21-7 quick. So I think UCF has to run the ball against this defense, and they have a good defense, but East Carolina was able to run the football against that Cincinnati defense last Friday night. So I think that's the key for UCF. To me, for Cincinnati cannot be afraid to. Same thing with Indiana. Cannot be afraid to play in a shootout. If Cincinnati's defense starts to let up points, Cincinnati can't say, okay, we have to keep with our game plan and this and that. They have to be able to change it and say, why not win a game 45-42? I think Cincinnati's offense, you've kind of talked about it too with Ritter. Their offense is good, but it's not great. It's a little it's a little not as high powered as some of these other American offenses are, but UCF's defense is not very good. So I think Cincinnati just can't be afraid to turn this into a track meet, turn this into a high scoring game, because they can against UCF's bad defense, and with the talent Cincy still has on that offense, they could.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one that I can talk about a lot. I was actually at the game last year between the two in Cincinnati, and the big thing that I took away from that game, I'm sure our friend Ben Gibson as well, is it seemed like UCF was trying to do too much through the air against Cincinnati in that game, especially with Dylan Gabriel last year as a freshman. They just kept putting him out there in bad situations, throwing on first and second down, and then it's third and long real quick. Now he's in trouble. I think where this game is going to be won if UCF is to win is up front, the front seven on defense, and then the offensive line for the offensive side. One thing that's not really talked about a lot with UCF is they have two offensive linemen that are probably going to go in the draft this year, one being Cole Schneider, offensive guard, the other being Parker Bordeaux, transfer from Notre Dame, another good offensive guard. They've got some good interior linemen that can set the tone, and it'll be interesting to see how they do against the Cincinnati front seven.
Mm-hmm.
If they can set that tone early, it'll help them out. UCF likes to play at a really quick pace, but they're conditioned for that. Uh, Cincinnati's played against some up-tempo teams before, but not quite to the extent that UCF plays. UCF tries to get a play in every 15 seconds or less. So they're up and at them real quick, and that'll be interesting to see the conditioning for the defensive side for Cincinnati. On offense, UCF has to be able to stop the run. They have to get pressure on Dylan Ritter. They have to force Dylan Ritter to make plays. 2 years ago, when Ritter was a freshman quarterback coming into Central Florida, he had a horrible time in that game. UCF only held him to 10 points, and they were rattled all game by the crowd noise. Won't be as big of a crowd, obviously, at this one because of COVID, but the front seven for UCF has to set the tone on defense if they're to win this game. Because if Cincinnati gets the run game going early, they set themselves up in second and third and short, then that's advantageous to them. So I think this game is going to be won by the fronts. The offensive line, whichever offensive line can set the tempo on the offensive side, dominate the front seven, will have a good chance going forward. And then on the defensive side, whatever front seven can get, after the quarterback can stop the run is probably going to win this game. I think, that's where it's going to be won.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you there because like you said, if UCF can control that line of scrimmage on offense and establish a good run game and run the football, I think that really favors UCF because then it sets up everything you want to do in the passing game. And same thing with Cincinnati. If their offensive line control the line of scrimmage, protect Ritter, get their run game going, and let Ritter have time to make decisions, then they can put up a lot of points on that UCF defense potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think this will be a good game. We can talk about it a little bit more, obviously, when we get to our bets, because I know we both are eyeing some stuff in this game. So, I think it'll be a good game. I think this will be. I think we have a nice slate of games this week, and this one is definitely at the top.
Yeah, I think this might be the game of the weekend. It might come off as a little biased, but typically these two teams play each other very tight.
Mm-hmm.
They've only played each other 5 times, and all 5 since joining the American. But every game outside of that game 2 years ago in Central Florida has been a one-score game. So this will be a very tight game down to the end, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll move on to another game at the 2:30 slate in the Big Ten, and this one's Wisconsin and Northwestern, in what seems like a battle for who's going to Indianapolis on the other side of the division to play Ohio State. You got 2 undefeated teams. Wisconsin not as surprising as Northwestern, but maybe the way Wisconsin is playing offensively is a little surprising to some. And we've only really seen Wisconsin in 2 games, so haven't seen a whole lot of them. But we've seen Northwestern through 4 games, and they've got a pretty good defense. So this is an interesting matchup going forward. And what do you think about it, Wetzel?
Yeah, I mean Northwestern's defense, they've held their opponents to under 150 yards rushing in every game this year. That's obviously Wisconsin's bread and butter, running the football, offensive line play. So that's going to be, I think, the most interesting matchup. But I think it ultimately comes down to for Wisconsin, Mertz is the X factor. Wisconsin wants to run the football. Northwestern's got a good run defense. Can Mertz make some plays in the passing game to either open up that run game or to keep the ball moving down the field? He's the best quarterback they've had in a long time. I think it just comes down to him. If he can make the plays in the passing game, I think Wisconsin has a good enough offensive line to protect him. They have a good enough run game to keep the box light or keep that defense guessing. But I think it just comes down to if Wisconsin does what Wisconsin does, they will win. If they run the ball well, they play good defense. They put up 28 points. I think their defense is good enough. It just comes down to I don't think Northwestern's on the same level as Wisconsin. So if Wisconsin just does what they do in these kinds of games, they'll be fine, and they'll I think win and keep their chances for that Big Ten title game alive.
Yeah, I agree on a lot of what you said there. Wisconsin has way more talent than Northwestern. Northwestern has played a little more games, so we've seen them a little more. Beat Maryland week one in an absolute rout, 43-3. One at Iowa in a big one, 21-20. One hosting Nebraska the following week, 21-13, and then just one at Purdue, 27-20. I mean, this defense can play, as you talked about. They stop the run. And in my opinion, whatever quarterback makes the most plays in this game, whether it's Peyton Ramsey or Graham Mertz, is the team that's going to win it. And ultimately, we know, in our opinion, that Graham Mertz is the more talented quarterback. So it definitely favors Wisconsin. But weird things happen early games up in Evanston. So you never can really tell. I think it'll be a little tighter than people think. I think a lot of people think this might be a two-score game by the end of it, and I'm not so sure about that because Northwestern and Wisconsin both have very good defenses,
Mm-hmm.
and Northwestern's proved it throughout every game so far this year. And I think it'll be interesting, but I do think Wisconsin wins. I think they've got more talent. They've got Graham Mertz, the better quarterback than Peyton Ramsey. But
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if this ends up being a one-score game.
I think I obviously, like, we tend to have recency bias, and we saw what Wisconsin did against Michigan last week, and obviously Michigan's not very good, and we're saying, oh well, they put up however many points and won by however many they ended up winning by, but I do think there is some value there when you look at they had 2 weeks off from beating a bad Illinois team, and they still were able to basically do whatever they wanted to. Yes, it was against a bad Michigan team, but like they still were able to come out after that break and play really, really good. That defense is legit, and that's, I think that had some value to it. So I think it, like you said, it comes down whichever quarterback plays well. I think that's my key for Wisconsin is Mertz is good enough to do what he has shown he can do, and that I think will be the how Wisconsin wins the game is they exploit that Northwestern pass defense a little bit and move the ball down the field enough to put some points on the board. Um, so
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think this is definitely Wisconsin's game to lose.
mm-hmm,
Like you said, having that 2-week bye for Michigan and then coming out the way they did is pretty impressive. I think Wisconsin's got one of the best defensive coordinators in the business.
mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, he probably won't get a head coaching shot with Wisconsin. And he gets the most out of his guys, but
That's fun.
he's
They were talking about it on Sanford Stephen the Bears podcast. That Wisconsin defensive coordinator spot is like a perfect job to have,
yeah,
right? Because you get your guys every year. You get the guys you want. You get into a you're in a division in a conference where it's usually low scoring games where your defense matters, and he's shown that he can coach those guys. And I think, like, they brought the point of, what do you want to leave? Like, you're making a good amount of money, I'm guessing. You're winning. You're on a good staff. You're on a good team. You're coaching a good group of kids that you don't have any problems with. You send a couple to the NFL every year. It's like, it's like, do you even want to leave that job?
you don't really want to, but at the same time, if somebody a better position comes calling a lot of money, it's hard to turn those situations down. I know Wisconsin fans want him to eventually be the head coach, but the problem is you got to get Paul Chryst out, and Paul Chryst isn't going to really do anything to make himself get out of town too
Right.
quickly.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you. We'll move on to being the Big 12 guy that I am. I think the biggest game of the weekend, Oklahoma State going to Norman, Bedlam, in-state rivalry. Um, this game, I think they're talking about it being the Big 12's last chance to get a team into the college football playoff because apparently, you know, the media, ESPN, all those people think that the only team that can make it in the Big 12 championship is Oklahoma, which is not true. Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, all still alive to make that. Um, but this game, I think could be the most entertaining game of the weekend simply because these games have been good in the past. You have I think a more even matchup this year than we have seen in the last few years have produced good games. So I think this will be a good game. I have some keys to it, but let's hear your thoughts on it first.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be definitely one of the best games of the week, and in my opinion, Oklahoma State's got a very good defense. Oklahoma, we know, likes to run up and down the field and score a lot of points. So the two contrasting styles. I think one thing that I'm looking at is the injuries for Oklahoma State. Hubbard's dinged up, along with, I believe, a wide receiver. I think it's Wallace that's dinged up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then even on Oklahoma's side, there was injury reports for Spencer Rattler this week, having dealt with something. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on those going forward towards game time. But this is definitely a game that's traditionally produced some fireworks. Usually when you hear Bedlam, you're thinking points, points, points. Might not be the case this year, and I think that's Oklahoma State's best chance to win is if it's not points, points, points. If they get after Spencer Rattler early, we've seen him make mistakes in big situations already. So I think if they can cause a lot of pressure, force some turnovers, force them into some bad throws or some third down and longs to get some pressure on them, I think Oklahoma State's got a chance, and I think a lot of people are writing off Oklahoma State too early already in this game because Oklahoma has been rolling the last few weeks, but not really against great competition. And this is really their first big test since that 4 overtime game against Texas. And I think it'll be a very good game.
Yeah, I 100% agree with your point there that they've been rolling against some bad teams. They put up 62 points against Texas Tech and then 62 points against Kansas. Like that, like they have a good offense, but they struggled against good defenses, right? Like they struggled against Iowa State. Um, Texas doesn't have a good defense, but they still
They
struggled
struggled. Yeah.
against Texas. Um, they again didn't really struggle against TCU, but they didn't look like Oklahoma's offense against TCU. So it's like when they play some decent defenses, they've struggled. So we can't think that they just because they played Texas Tech and Kansas and put up 62 points like they're supposed to, they got everything fixed on that side, especially if Rattler is dinged up. Um, Oklahoma State, I think the biggest key to Oklahoma State is they have to be able to score points and finish drives. The last 3 weeks they've put up 20, or the last 3 games they've put up 20, 24, and 34 in an overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So they score enough to win, but they've been playing a lot of close, low scoring for Big 12 scores, low scoring games. So and Oklahoma's defense is not that good. Teams have found success against that defense. So I think if those injuries that you were mentioning earlier are true, and those guys do that, like you can see those injuries, and either they don't play or they're clearly not healthy. I think that's a big loss for Oklahoma State if it's Hubbard and Wallace. They're the two guys they rely on the most. But I think this game comes down to Oklahoma's offense against Oklahoma State's defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's Oklahoma's best weapon against Oklahoma State's best weapon, and I think especially if Oklahoma State is struggling to score the football, that puts that much more pressure on their defense to keep this game low scoring. Because I think same thing with Indiana, Ohio State. If the game shows it's going to be high scoring early, that favors Oklahoma State, just like it would favor Ohio State, just like it would keep Indiana in the game.
Mm.
The game is low scoring. Oklahoma State, I think, keeps a decent chance to win because I don't think that they can put up points to match Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tend to agree. I think the one thing in my mind is we haven't seen the best of Oklahoma State's offense this year
Hmm.
because they have had so many injuries. You know, they're missing Spencer Sanders for a few weeks. Now you've got Hubbard dinged up. You've got Tylan Wallace dinged up. So it's kind of unfortunate because they do have a lot of good players on that offense. They just haven't been able to string it all together.
Right, right.
If they could string it all together this week, then maybe they could win a shootout. But with the injuries, it's hard to imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at them though; they've only scored 40 points or more one time, and it was against Kansas. So
Mhm.
throughout this whole year, even in, like I said, even in overtime against Texas, they only put up 34 points, and then they played a sloppy kind of ugly game against Kansas State, only put up 20. You put up 24 against Iowa State, again, which is the best defense outside of Oklahoma State's that they're going to play, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just their offense has really, really struggled this year, and I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get into my bets. But Gundy is only 2-15 against Oklahoma in his career at Oklahoma State, so he's struggled there. Obviously, he hasn't had the talent that Oklahoma had. Like, he's had some good teams, but not to Oklahoma's level. So I think that this is another year where he has the talent, just not the talent that Oklahoma has,
Mhm.
but he has a defense that he hasn't had in recent years. And I think that they got to rely heavily on that defense in this game.
Yeah, I think the last win for Gundy against Oklahoma was the Tyreek Hill or punt return for a touchdown. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the last win, and that was back in 2014. But speaking of bets, let's get into our bets, and we're going to do it a little differently this week. We're going to start with overs that we like. And I'll start off. I've got two overs on my list, or actually three overs on my list or no. Yeah, I've got two overs on my list, sorry. The first one I've got is that Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina game, and here's why. Coastal Carolina has been very dominant in big games, like you mentioned. Appalachian State played against Marshall earlier in the year, where everybody was expecting a lot of points, and then it ended up being the opposite. It was a lot of defense. But I think this one is different because I think Coastal Carolina's offense, with their quarterback healthy, is different. I think they're very good no matter who they play against in that Sun Belt. And I think they'll put up at least around 30 points. And right now, the over under sitting at 40. So you only need about 17, 18 points from Appalachian State. And even if Smith isn't playing, I think they can get there. So I think this one easily goes over. And the next one I have is Liberty at NC State. This is
Yep.
Liberty's second ACC opponent where they're on the road and they're underdogs. I think the Liberty team's got a really good offense. Hugh Freeze has got them going. Um, NC State gives up a lot of points. We saw them against Miami, seen them all year. Against North Carolina, they also gave up a lot of points. They also score a lot of points. So I think this one easily goes over. Right now, it's sitting around 66.
Yeah, I have three overs. I'll start with the Liberty NC State game because I'm on that game as well. I think the over. I like that over. Liberty's averaging 40.5 points a game this year, so I don't see, like you said, after seeing NC State, their defense against Miami. I'm not saying Liberty's got the same offense as Miami because Miami's got Derek King, but that defense shows that they can um, give up some points. So you get even 35 out of Liberty. My NC State also showed against Miami that they can score points. So I like that over. I have it at 67.5. I think that this game could easily be 40 something to 40 something, and this over under gets up into the 80s. Um, Another over, the over that I really, really like this week is Florida versus Vandy. It's at 68 right now. Florida's averaging 46 points a game. I think that I don't see any reason why they can't score 50-something this week against Vandy. Vandy is letting up 35 points a game. Florida has it rolling on all cylinders offensively. Their last few games, they put up 63 last week against Arkansas. They put up 44 against Georgia, 41 against Missouri. Like I said, no reason why they can't put up something in the 50s, and then you just need 2 touchdowns from Vandy, which I think is possible. Florida does not have a great defense. Their defense is allowing 30 points a game, so I think Vandy could put up a couple touchdowns in this one. So I'm on the over there of 68. And then my third over, Clemson versus Florida State. 63.5 is the line that I show. I think Clemson can do that by themselves. I think Clemson gets the over alone, but I think Florida State should put up 10, 14 points in this one. So I'm on that one because I think this game, you're going to see a lot of resemblance in this game as you did to Clemson versus Georgia Tech, where Clemson just scored on every possession they touched the ball. They just made Georgia Tech look inferior or look so much worse than I think that they really are, and they'll do the same with Florida State. I don't see why Trevor Lawrence won't come out and throw for 6 touchdowns. So those are the 3 overs that I'm on. We'll move to unders, and while I'm not a big under guy, I do like an under this week. I'm going Georgia and Mississippi State under. 44.5 is the line right now. They talked about on Stanford Steve and the Bears podcast as well. The Bear brought up the point of if Georgia really wanted to, they could shut out Mississippi State. Mississippi State did not score against Alabama. They are only averaging 16.5 points a game this year. And I look at this game and I don't see Mississippi State wanting to throw the ball over the place. That being Georgia's kind of mentality is lockdown defense in the air. I don't see how Mississippi State is going to score. You look at the stats, Georgia's allowing 20 points a game. So and they're only scoring 29. So even if Georgia gives up 17 points and they only score 20, that's still only 37 points a game or points. I think Georgia's going to come out this game and they're just going to absolutely shut down Mississippi State. And I think that Georgia actually announced that Daniels is going to start this game. So that it worries me a little bit because I think he is the better quarterback. We've talked about this a little bit. We both agree he's better than Barrett. Is it Barnett or Barrett?
Bennett. Stetson Bennett.
Bennett. We both agree he's better. I've been saying you can't bench Bennett until he loses. They lost against Florida. I understand that decision then, but so I don't like it from that standpoint because I think he is better. But I also like it from the standpoint of new quarterback. Don't really know what you're going to get. They're probably going to want to run the ball more. Mississippi State also has a pretty good defense. They're only giving up 27 points a game. SEC scoring has been up as a whole this year, so 27 points a game is decent. So I like the under in this one. I think you're going to see a game somewhere probably like 21-7, 28-7, something like that. Mississippi State's not going to score. I don't think Georgia goes off and scores a bunch of points either.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to add that game to my card as well. With the under 44.5 there, I also think the new quarterback plays into effect there because, they just announced it yesterday that he's starting. So you don't know how many first team reps he's had, not only this week, but, previous weeks as well.
And he's been injured too. So even if he wanted to get reps and he couldn't.
Yeah. So I think that's just a safe play there. And then I've actually got another under, and I'm going to go to the Pac-12 for this one, Cal and Oregon State. Oregon State offensively is not too great, but they've got a decent defense. Cal traditionally, I don't know if you saw any of that Sunday game against UCLA, but their offense looked very, very bad. But they've still got a really good defense. So I think the number's at 49 right now, and I think that's an easy under. So I'm going to take that one and move into the favorites. Right now, I've got two favorites. I like Ohio State at 20.5. It's a large number for going against the top 10 team, but we've talked about this. You need style points this year. More than ever, you need to pass the eye test. Indiana has played 4 teams so far with a combined record of 3-13. So they haven't necessarily played an Ohio State caliber team yet. And this is a huge step up in competition. They can't rely on that turnover luck because Ohio State's not going to beat themselves. Justin Fields has as many incompletions as touchdowns, has yet to throw a pick, and I think Ohio State's going to try and roll in a big way in this one. So give me the 20.5. I'll probably even, once the first half line comes out, I'll probably even take that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The other favorite I'm on is I'm going back to something I was doing earlier in the year, and that's Clemson in the first half. Florida State has lost a couple people due to transfers, injuries, stuff like that. Mike Norvell's starting to get his guys in and getting the people who's not with the program, not with his program, out. I think Florida or Clemson, like you said, is similar to that Georgia Tech game. They come out in a big way in that first half, and they put, probably 40 points on them in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And Florida State will be lucky to put 7 points up. So I think whatever the first half line is, give me that in the Clemson game. What do you have for your favorites?
Yeah, I agree with you there with Clemson. That's a line I'm watching right now. It's at 35.5. So obviously 35 is a football number. So watching for that to maybe go down a little bit. But I still think Clemson wins by more than that. So, if it doesn't move right before the game, I'll still probably take them at 35.5. Even if it goes up a little bit, but definitely like the first half. I'm with you on that one. I think Florida State would be lucky to score 7 points in the first half. Clemson should score every offensive possession they touch the ball. We talked about it earlier in our preview. I like Coastal minus the 5.5. They're 0-6 versus Appalachian State, like I said earlier, but they're at home. They're playing well. I think that Coastal is the better team in this game. I think that they win this game by more than the 5.5. So give me Coastal. Another game that I am watching, the line Oklahoma State. Like I said earlier, Gundy 2-15 versus Oklahoma. It's 7.5 right now. If it goes down to 7, I'll take that. 7.5, don't love it. 7 being a football number. But that's another game where right before kickoff, if it doesn't change, I'll still take the 7.5. Maybe tease that one down in a teaser. But I think Oklahoma is the better team. I think Oklahoma is just more than a set. I think they win the game by more than 7. I think that they have what it takes to win this game again. Keep that train rolling against Oklahoma State. So I'm on those 3 favorites. That being said, there are a couple other that I'm kind of watching, and that the other game that I'm watching is the Iowa State-Kansas State game. Obviously, I'm an Iowa State fan, so I have some rooting interest. I probably won't play anything on it, just being the fan that I am. But it's at 10.5 right now, or 11. Kansas State has had a ton of COVID stuff going on recently in their facility, so they've been without their starting quarterback. There's a chance that some more guys on that offense and defense will be out. When these two teams play, they're usually close and low scoring. But I think that if Kansas State loses the guys that are potentially going to be out, I think Iowa State wins this game by 14, 17, somewhere around there. So they would cover the spread. So that's a game I'm just kind of keeping an eye on for that favorite. But the 3 favorites I really like: Clemson, Coastal, Oklahoma. Just kind of watching those lines to see if they go below the football number. And then we'll get into our underdogs. These are dogs we like to either win outright on money lines or cover their points that they're given. I'm going to go to the Pac-12. I like Washington State plus the 2.5. I watched that game against Oregon, and Washington State led for a lot of the game. They really should have won that game if they let up some drives to Oregon late in the game, and that score turned out a little bit bigger than it was. I was on Oregon, but I really liked what I saw from Washington State. DeLora, quarterback for Washington State, really like what I've seen from him, and that offense. They're playing Stanford, who currently sits at 0-2, currently sits at 0-2 against the spread, and yet is still favored against Washington State at home. I watched Stanford play Colorado last week. I was on Stanford. They made it closer than it really was, but Colorado made Stanford look bad offensively. So I'm going to take Washington State there. I think Washington State could even win this game outright. Haven't liked what I've seen from Stanford. And then the other dog, this is another line that I'm watching because it's moved a lot. We talked about it earlier in our preview. UCF and Cincy. Right now, the line is 4.5 on FanDuel in Illinois. That almost makes me want to take Cincy, but it's tough for me to not take UCF at home getting points. So this is a line I'm going to watch. To me, if this line stays at 4.5, I don't love it. I might just stay away. If it goes back up to 5.5, 6, where it was earlier in the week, I want to take Central Florida. Give me them plus that. If it goes down to 3.5, I might take Cincinnati because we talked about these games are close. These games are going to be bad. This game's going to be a close back and forth kind of. It could be low scoring, could be high scoring, whatever. But it's going to be a tightly contested back and forth game. So I think if the line goes down, I'm going to take the favorite. If the line stays up, I'm going to take UCF. But I think whatever the line is, UCF money line, maybe throw a couple bucks on there because I think UCF can win this game outright.
Yeah. So I've got two dogs. I'll get to the first one. First one's in the Pac-12 as well, but I don't have Wazoo. Although I do like Wazoo. I like what you said about them. They actually got a really good freshman quarterback out of Hawaii. This is like the third or fourth straight year we've seen a really good freshman quarterback out of Hawaii. The guy, I don't know how he ended up at Wazoo, probably because the coach used to be in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
But that guy is somebody to keep an eye on. But I'm going to go to Utah playing USC. USC's laying 2.5 points. And that makes me think that Utah, even though they haven't played a game yet, that makes me think they're going to win this game outright. But I'm going to take the spread at 2.5. I think Utah is just a really well-coached team. Year in, year out, you know what you're going to get out of Whittingham. They lose a lot from last year, but USC has really not looked good at all. The first two games should have lost to Arizona State. They played a bad Arizona team and kept them in it all game. So I think Utah's going to win this game.
Well, and I don't know what the stat is now, but we talked, I think, 2 weeks ago
when like
teams playing their first game against a team that's playing their second, third, or whatever game, the team that's playing their first game has a better ATS than the team playing their second or third game. So if that trend continues, then I like that pick. I don't know what that stat is at now, but that's trending in that with that record.
Yeah, and then my other one is UCF. There's sometimes where you have to take your team that you root for, and I think this is one of those times. I'm going to give you some stats too to back it up. UCF, this is only the fourth time since 2017 that they've been an underdog. They're 2-1 straight up in those games. They're 3-0 against the spread. So take that spread. And I think you take it confidently, especially if it gets up in the 6 range. Take it. As an underdog, they love when they're an underdog because their whole mentality, the last few years is nobody gives us enough respect. We got to go out and get our respect.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they feel like they're getting disrespected here. They're motivated. There's a lot of quotes coming out of the practice that says, everybody's not counting or is counting us out. A lot of the money, if you look at the numbers on whatever website, most of the money is on Cincinnati. Almost everybody's on Cincinnati. And the line opened up at 3.5. And if it all the money's on Cincinnati and it's not moving over 7, that gives me a sign, okay, UCF really has a chance to win this game. So I'm going to take a money line. I think this is, again, one of those situations you got to go with your team. I gave out those stats as well. I also talked earlier about their offensive line. They've got a couple guys that are probably going to go in the draft. I think this is a different type of offense for Cincinnati that they're not used to seeing. When you talk about American offenses, you usually talk about the up-tempo, right? The teams that gun it around, sling it around. And UCF can do that, but they also have very good and underrated offensive line play. They also have pretty good defensive line play. Last year, they led the country in tackles for loss. This year, they're in the top 10 in tackles for loss. Yes, they give up a lot of points, but that defensive line is still strong, still gets after the quarterback. And I think that's a big difference. Like we said, whoever controls the lines is probably going to win this game. I think UCF's going to do that.
Yeah, I'm still hesitant to take it right now. I just the spread, like it's come down, which shows that people are pounding UCF spread, but it's tough when you think about UCF the last couple of years. It's tough to bet against them at home in the underdog role, like you mentioned. So game's not till 2:30, so have about 24 hours, a little bit more to see if that line keeps moving. But I think that that'll be an interesting one to watch because, like I said, if it goes down some more, maybe you just take the UCF money line. If it goes up a little bit more, maybe then look at the spread and the money line. So I think that's just going to be an interesting one to watch. But
I think
definitely think it'll be a good game nonetheless.
Another thing I want to point out too as well is this is the first time that Cincinnati's on the road where they're allowing students and actual fans into the game, not just friends, family, and parents.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first actual road game where they have a little bit of crowd noise. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it's not the full capacity. I think it's going to be about 25%, but the noise in that bounce house there still travels pretty well and still echoes. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all we've got for college football this week. Join us next week as we talk more college football, and we'll get into a college basketball preview here in a few moments.